Hey everyone, I'm Mark Grasse, and you're listening to Podcast Mark. Right now, I have a good friend of mine on, Kevin Barber. We worked at Digital Marketer a bit together. We spoke on stage at TNC, and I really just like Kevin. He's really cool. He has a very calm demeanor, even though we could talk about some pretty heavy stuff, especially in business and management. But you're super chill, so I really enjoy that about you. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me on the show. And it's funny that you say that because how my team tends to describe me is intense. So it'll be interesting to see how we go on that. And I think I go
I
back and
think I am
forth
too.
between keeping it level because this is about my excited voice, but also having like just some fairly intense expectations and goals. And it's like, how do you balance that? You know?
Well, I think you have it. You have like this presentation. You're usually smiling. You got like like yeah, we'll figure it out. And I think it's almost like that casual approach to serious situations that people probably. Well, I like it. Because you could just be angry or intense and mean, and it's like, oh no, you don't want that combo. You want like intense and cool. That's
Right. And intense and visibly frustrated Kevin does occasionally come out, but I'm
oh yeah.
working on keeping that guy locked away.
No,
So that's the process.
no, don't keep them locked away. That's exactly how to create repressed issues. You got to be like, nope, I need to realize why I'm feeling like that, and then how do I integrate those same feelings back into me, and then now you present both, and you don't have to hide anything. So
Well, I'll tell you this. I tried an experiment in 2023, and I'm not sure if you know this story, but when people would go into Microsoft when Bill Gates was CEO, based upon the color of pass that you had, if you were a visitor, you were supposed to follow a certain line through the building to get to your destination, even if it wasn't the most direct path.
uh,
Okay. And the reason why they did that is because they were navigating visitors to the building around the path where there was no chance that they would hear Bill Gates yelling because he was very much command and control, and this is how we're going to get this done. So I did release myself in 2023 to be more just literally what I'm thinking.
uh,
And I will tell you that maybe it worked for him, but it did not work for me or my team. And I still need to bring it back and circle the team around what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, and why this doesn't hit that goal. And I got to slow down to deliver that feedback, or as recently in the last 2 days, they just can't receive it in a constructive way. And
mm.
I think that'll set up pretty well for our topic today, which is pretty fun.
Oh yeah, no, that's a perfect lead in, because I think what you did is good, where you said like, okay, I'm gonna be more this way because it's more direct and it's more honest, frankly, versus pussyfooting around issues and being like, well, Sally has feelings about this or Bob has feelings about this, so we won't talk to him about that. And
Right.
honestly, that kind of, it's deception is what you're doing. And
I
it's not
agree.
on purpose necessarily, and maybe it's necessary at the time, but all it does is kick the can down the road, right?
I agree. And I've long said that one of my personal gifts is actually just being from Kansas, where if you're from Kansas, you use small words and you say what's on your mind. And it's just like that's what's going to happen. And I attract a lot of East and West Coast clients for which I believe this is unfamiliar territory. So like, and there's a bluntness that I think is oftentimes congratulated, but it does lead to tenser conversations when you're short of a goal.
Yeah, but the intense conversations have to happen a lot of times, because what usually happens, especially in like bigger organizations, is that you're like, okay, we're not gonna confront Bob because Bob is intense. Bob is going through a rough time. Like, we're not gonna bring up this issue. We're just gonna move him to a different department. Oh, look, he's having trouble there too. Well, this time is he's going through this, and we can't mess that up, so we'll move him to this department. And so it's like this shuffleboard where no progress is made, and you're just not addressing a problem. You're just moving the problem. And it looks
Right.
like progress and it looks like action, but what it is just you avoiding the thing that has to happen. Bob is not a fit here, and there's
Right.
nothing wrong with that. It happens all the time, and he'll be
Well,
happy. You'll be happy.
and my view on that, and for all the founders and business owners and leaders out there, is I'm not trying to poke the bear, but I'm not willing to avoid the topic.
I like that.
So it's not intentionally. Uh, I'm not intentionally trying to bring tension to the situation. I'm just establishing a bar and holding it. And Bob, in your example, probably either has an opportunity to grow or an opportunity to recognize that this is not his priority,
Yeah.
you know?
Well,
So
and honestly, you're not avoiding the tension there because we all feel it. Everybody knows there's a problem and everybody's probably talking about it, just not to the managers. And because they're afraid of what might happen if they do this. And so I think it's even in the small deceptions, you're creating a culture where, essentially there's untruth happening that we all know about, but we're all perpetuating because it's convenient, or maybe it's inconvenient to address at the time. So we'll just kick the can and blah, 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 blah. But I think now, especially most businesses, you have 12,000 layoffs at UPS. You have Dell doing layoffs. You have Amazon doing massive layoffs. I think the time to address issues is like a few months ago. And
right.
the next best time is this instant. So, I love that you did the transformation being a little bit more, blunt, last year. But now that you've done that and you did have some, say negative feedback on how you were doing it, how would you go about it now?
I still have to say the thing, but I can spend a few more moments in how I say it.
Okay.
Right. So I can remind that we have this specific goal, we have this bar we're looking to meet, we have this organization we want to be. And we need to be able to ask, does this hit that bar? Or is there an opportunity to learn something from this? And if I can phrase it that way, which is still a little bit difficult for me because there's an efficiency of Kevin that I'm seeking to maintain versus, what's going on with this? Is it a problem? Um, I don't view that as an attack, but it's possible to receive it as one. I'm just asking, but that was literally the topic of one of our team huddles is asking is not threatening and answering is not mounting a defense. It's just answering the question, and let's not deflect and let's not, read more into it than someone seeking information about a matter that maybe is important and maybe is a non-issue. And if I give them the answer, they will better know.
Oh,
So,
oh
um,
yeah.
and I think that where we are today is we're in a situation of uncertainty that makes people uncertain, that makes them in um, a little bit less confident about questions that come up, especially around potential issues, and we get a little bit defensive and deflective about it. And the fact is that the number one skill that we probably all need in order to succeed in the next 5, 7 years is the ability to adapt.
Hmm.
So if we're not able to take in new information, receive it, process it, get it back in an effective way so that we can adapt to whatever changes come from that conversation quickly, then what are we doing? Because there is so much change right now in the marketplace, not just marketing, not just AI, but like just like fundamental transformations. People are changing how they buy, they're changing what their priorities are. We have governmental, political transformations happening. There's a lot of change happening. Adaptation is probably the number one skill we all need to get good at.
Oh yeah. But with that said, we all have to adapt. I think you can't adapt until you really understand why you're making the decisions you're making, or why you are the way you are, or why your company culture is the way the company culture is. Because until you can accept that hey, this was a problem and we all kind of saw it, but we all kind of just ignored it for now is blowing up into, okay, we can't even move forward until we acknowledge that was a problem. Like it's a problem. It's right there. We all see it. We all know it. And we're just not talking about it because it's uncomfortable,
Right.
and we're scared.
And if there's anything that I've learned in my business, which is that what once was a one-time event or a two-time event can become, if you don't address it, it can become your ceiling.
Oh
And
yeah.
all of a sudden, like that is your limiting factor, and you simply can't get above it because you never addressed that thing that happened once, and it happened 3 times, and it happened 5 times, then it happened at the wrong time, and now the consequences are significant. And I mean, I guess you can't go in perfection for everything, but when you see something that's below the bar, you might as well get in front of it.
Yeah. Well, just acknowledge it, and I had, I keep talking about this podcast I did last week with Justin Breen, but he literally wouldn't let me get past it. He literally said, no, you're doing that thing again. Like you're not moving past it. And he just kept on saying it until I was like, all right, I'm not gonna do it anymore. But it took that level of just like conviction and accusation is really what it was, where I was just like, oh my gosh, he's completely right. And I've done this a bunch of times, but I'm always around people who love me and who are like, well, it's okay. Like that's fine. That happens to people. And you have all this kind of like support for the wrong thing. And you just got to do what you got to do. And most of us know, especially if you've been in business like you have for as long as you have, what
Mhm.
needs to happen. You know that maybe that person's a really bad fit and you're keeping them around for XYZ reason, but it's not to contribute to the purpose of the organization. It's you don't want to deal with the problem right now, or you're unrealistic with what kind of change that person's capable of.
Right. I think there's sometimes that where, yeah, at the end of the day, this is more scope of change than someone's capable of. And then I also view that, like, we have a lot of people that come into lean labs that ultimately become CMOs of organizations. And I'm kind of happy for them, but I'm always sad to lose them too. You know what I mean? It's like, especially when the offer is like sweet. Okay, it's
Oh
like,
yeah, you're
okay,
like, I can't
okay,
believe
there you go.
that.
I did my job. But I also view it's part of a mentoring process. Hey, if you want to accomplish all your goals in your life, you're going to need to be able to address this situation better.
Mm,
Otherwise, this is going to become a problem no matter where you go.
no.
And a lot of times that's a little bit of the little
A little
pop
wake
on
up
the
call.
cheek. Oh, open hand little pop on the cheek of like, hey, maybe we can look at this a little bit of a different way. Does everyone see it the way I see it? No. And then sometimes that leads to that separation. But I think a lot of times it leads to growth,
It
you
does.
know?
Yeah. Well, and for both parties too. Because I think a lot of times you have this thing sitting on your back and you're like, man, I know I got to take care of this. I got to get this off my back. I know I can. I know I need to. But for whatever reason, you just don't. And when you finally do, and you're like, rip the band-aid off, and you're like, man, that sucked, but it's over now. And how much time was I wasting? How much energy and mental power was I wasting thinking about this thing that you could just solve today? And yeah, maybe there's consequences and there's bad things that you'll have to deal with, or not bad things, but just like other actions that are going to have to happen because you took that action. But even then, it's still making progress and moving forward versus sitting.
And there's two things. They say that the definition of hell is the time period between when you know you need to fire someone and when you really do.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one side of the coin. But there's the other side of the coin because not everything is about just firing people that don't hit your bar. A lot of it's about mentoring people into the best version of themselves. And I would argue a second form of a definition of hell, at least for me, is when you know a conversation needs to be had in order to get back to a point of alignment. And the further and longer you delay that, that breeds resentment and contempt and all sorts of unhealthy things in a relationship because you can feel it below the surface. And you
Mhm.
can apply that to your business life, your personal life. Like, you know, I'm the kind of person that when I see a problem, I'm going to come running at you with it because I want to get past it,
Get
you
rid
know?
of it. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. And I think when and then if you make a habit of doing this where you're like identifying problems, addressing the problems, then you start to acknowledge that other people are avoiding problems. And some people do have an issue with you or something that you're doing, and you could tell they have an issue with it, but they're not maybe comfortable enough, maybe courageous enough or whatever, but they're not confronting you about it. So now you have to deal with that where you're like, man, I know you have a problem. Could we just please talk about it? And then
Right.
it'll suck or it
Some
won't
people
suck.
are not built for that. I
Oh,
describe myself, self-described as a confrontational relationship builder. So
oh,
I'm coming
oh,
right
that's a
at you.
great. You should make a book.
Coming right at you. But it's with the goal that we become something
Yeah.
more together. So that's the deal.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, there's nothing bad, and we all acknowledge that we have to do these things. And honestly, if you want to say, because a lot of people don't really accept the fact that people are in leadership positions because they're just better at doing that than other people. But that's a primary quality of leaders is the ability to recognize these problems and then take on the work that it's going to take to address them. Because typically, um, most people just don't. They just float through and hope it goes away and that's it. But you're paid more to make these decisions. And so if you're not making these decisions, you're literally not doing the thing that, you know, gets you the dollars. Because you
Right.
don't get more dollars just because well, you do if you work for the government. just because you're there. But most industries, and in reality, you have to continue to progress. Otherwise, you just don't belong in that
Right.
position.
And a lot of people try to take a linear path to, a magnitude goal. So like you're trying to put a zero on the end of your income, like that's more of an exponential or multiplication goal. You're
Mhm.
generally not going to take a linear path to get there. You're
Yeah.
generally going to have to unbecome several aspects of who you are and adopt several new aspects of who you can potentially be in order to get there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, even if you were granted the role, you were granted the title, granted the income, you're not going to be able to maintain it.
No. Well, and honestly, you're not going to feel like you belong there either. And this goes into that kind of like self-deception that you have where you're, oh, the imposter syndrome is what they call it.
Mhm.
But even that's super temporary as long as you're willing to come up with the big decisions that you have to make to be there. But all that's hard. So let's talk about the chaos of the economy and kind of how people could steer their themselves and their organizations into uncertain waters. If you say like everybody's the captain of the business ship that they're running, what do you do as we approach like a sea full of waves in the distance and really hitting the boats currently, and a massive storm and tornadoes popping up, and you're kind of like, well, hold tight. Like,
Right.
how do you motivate people in that circumstance?
So I think there's a couple things. The first one is we are in a sea of uncertainty, right? The country is divided over which way the wind is blowing, which way the current is flowing, and I would argue that there's this speech that I heard that once a country loses its myth, and that myth is that unifying belief about who they are, can become very difficult to regain that, and unless they reunite around either the original or a new myth.
Mm.
We might be there, right? So that's where we are geopolitically, possibly. And then from a business perspective, yeah, I mean, we got monetary challenges, we have workforce challenges, we have adoption of new technology challenges,
Mm.
and I don't think that the landscape of business, possibly the landscape of you know um, how we're working with money and politics is going to massively change, and that trickles down into how people work. We have to be ready for a significant component of that. Something that we did in advance of 2020, which served us really well, is we didn't have a growth plan. We had three. So, and we have done this before, and we maintain this, maybe not quite as well as we should, but we maintain this when we have a plan for our target growth. We have a plan for modest growth, and what does that look like? And
Mm.
what happens if we actually decline? Like, like what are the decisions we would make? Because like when you think those things out in advance, by the way, during, March of 2020, I had clients coming in and canceling basically what would be 250K a year, like every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. We got to pause, we got to pause, we got to pause, we got to pause. But when I would go to the gym and leave the gym, there would be like two more voice messages. So like yeah, we're heading into decline. What's interesting is we actually grew over 2019 that year,
Wow.
but it didn't look like that for a long, good while.
Oh yeah.
And the deal is that what we did have is we had the DEF CON plan in place. So like we're ratcheting up that DEF CON level. It's almost put your helmets on time.
Yeah.
And we knew what that looked like, and the team knew what that looked like. Okay, the first thing we do is we suspend bonuses.
Mm.
So like, and we'll look to repay those back. But right now we got to suspend them because we gotta mine the cash flow, because the one adversary I never want is math. Like
Yes.
math I need math on my side. It's formidable ally, and it's a scary enemy. So I'm not gonna go against math. If things aren't going away, we're gonna suspend bonuses. How can we be paying bonuses when the economics are not working, right?
Hmm.
We did that, and we actually got to a spot where we moved to 4 days a week for a while. And we had that plan in place and we knew it was in place. And so I think it was less shocking because it was discussed in advance. And by suspending bonus, moving to 4 days, we made a couple other little moves. That's what we needed to do. But I think it was less shocking, and we certainly weren't doing it in a reactive. Well, we were responding, but we weren't being like
Mhm.
polarizingly, like without irrationally reactive because we had actually thought about this in advance. So the first thing I'd probably suggest when the sea of change is have the, okay, if everything goes right, here's what happens. Okay, here's what, if a couple key things don't happen, what our year looks like, and here's what happens if we really just catch a hole in the bottom of the boat.
Yeah.
This is our protocol.
God.
So like that's how we go through it.
Imagine a world where your brand transcends visibility, embedding itself into the consciousness of your customers. Welcome to the AI Branding Bootcamp, where this vision becomes reality. Dive into AI-powered research, strategy, and execution to create a brand that's not just recognized, but felt. From crafting your brand's avatar to mastering AI-generated content, emerge with a brand that resonates deeply. Ready to transform your brand into an unforgettable experience? Join us at the AI Branding Bootcamp. The future of branding begins now. Well, and really for the employees and investors and whoever else is involved, you've just set the expectation, and you've shown that you have a plan based on all these different circumstances. And so there's no question, because on the flip side of that, your super duper success is, oh, what am I going to get out of our success? If you leave it open-ended versus, hey, if we do really good, you guys are getting this bonus. So now they're motivated, and now they haven't set some unrealistic expectation of like, oh, we're going to make it, and then I'm going to go buy a boat because I'm sure Kevin is going to give me like 20 grand and this is how I'm going to use it. And then when that doesn't happen because you didn't specify, then they're like, oh, it's only $5,000 or whatever. But the net effect is that they're disappointed, and you've destroyed their hope that they made for themselves, rather than just tell them exactly what the plan is. Like, hey man, we kill it, here's what's going to happen. Hey, we lose all these contracts, we lose 3 contracts a month, then this happens. But either way, people just want to know where you're going, right? I mean, that's leadership 101.
There's a little footnote in there because we ran into this here recently, which is, we pay out bonuses and there's quarterly bonuses available. And I had one member of my team who had earned it 7 times in a row. So 7 quarters in a row, but not the 8th. And they viewed that as a significant step backwards. Like, okay, so now we get to where there's an expectation and and they're not getting paid what they're expecting versus like, and that's a scary spot. So like, I'm open to anyone who has a comment on this, but what we're doing is we're starting to pay bonuses into a separate account. Like, you need to give us a bonus account. So that when you have bonus money, it goes into this other account. You're not expecting that every single time. Like if you want to earn bonuses, you're going to give us a bonus account to do our ACHs into. Because man, it is a tough deal to work with someone who has achieved a level of entitlement of whether they've earned the bonus or not, they expect it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, they start to live off of it. And that's
Right.
you
That's a
know
scary spot. And so like, I think that's the same thing that happens in our business, but that happened with, a team member. We got through it. But the deal is that it's the same thing that happens with a company. When you expect that it's going to go a certain way and then it doesn't, I hope you were prepared for it.
yes.
I hope you weren't, you know, not making your car payment this month. So I think that that's the way we need to apply. It's not baked in. We tend to have this local maximum bias,
Mm.
but that the best it ever was is the worst it'll ever be. And that's not how it always goes.
No. Well, it just sets up for disappointment and, perceived failure. And that's a bunch of wasted energy too. Because really what you described to me was a way to be efficient with everything, where it's like, hey, we're not going to and we all know emergency protocols are, oh, maybe we don't. So I worked as a lifeguard when I was in high school, and it was basically like, hey, if somebody dives in the pool and hits their head on the bottom, here's exactly what you're going to do. This person's going to go grab the board. This person gets in the pool to make sure they can breathe, and blah, 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 blah. It wasn't like oh crap, I better remember what
Go
is.
tell my manager, find out what I should do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Let me go get the book. Let me go get the procedure manual. It's like, no, we've talked about this. We've trained for it. We know it could happen. We're not saying that, setting up this expectation that life is going to be beautiful and perfect, which it never is, but we continue to act like it could be. And you're just accepting reality for what it is, preparing everybody, and now everybody's confident to move forward. And if they aren't, and if they don't like your plans, then they know your plans. And if they choose to stay, then that's on them. It's kind of where I've come to, because you've been honest. And I think when you do that, you're, saying the expectation that they're supposed to be honest too. They have a problem with this, with the bonus protocols and whatever. Let's talk about it. Maybe you have a perspective I didn't consider, and you keeping it quiet and you repressing that feeling that you have that whatever situation we set up is unfair isn't doing anything for anybody, including you or the company or anyone else. So I commend you on that, because that's I think that's genius, having the 3 plans.
Yeah. So, and then as we navigate this, and we know that in a sea of change, then we're likely gonna have to make adaptations, and we're gonna have to personally grow. If there's one nugget I'd like to drop, that hopefully is valuable, which is like, do we have a definition of growth? Do you have a definition of growth?
I do. Well, I mean, for me personally, but that changes all the time.
Gotcha. Would you like me to drop my definition of
Yes,
growth?
please.
All right, cool. So my definition of growth is intentional discomfort to achieve a target result. So like, if you're not making yourself intentionally discomfortable in some way, or you're applying that to your team with the context of what you're doing and why,
Mm.
um, but imposing intentional discomfort, then where will the growth come from? So
Ah,
whether that's getting up early to work out, or focusing yourself on a diet, or focusing yourself on a new uncomfortable, conversations with your spouse or with your team, if you're not intentionally going out into that thing that you've never done, how are you going to achieve the result that you've never had? And I think a lot of times companies just think, and individuals just think, that if I just keep doing what I'm doing, that it will become more valuable over time. And that is an unfair expectation, especially in a marketplace where how we value things is changing so rapidly.
oh,
And so, like, not only is it your job to work on your job, and I don't care if you're the owner, you still have a role, but it's your job to make yourself intentionally discomfort in an area, in a targeted area, in order to achieve a new objective, and to ask a couple of your team members to come with you and take part of this discomfort, so we can go do it together. And it's like, if we don't hold on to the fact that the mindset and attitude is, in order to achieve this goal, we have to go become uncomfortable together, then I don't think it's going to be achieved with the success rate of the team that did, you know?
I love that. And I'm going to change my answer, because I actually just thought of this like maybe 1 or 2 days ago. I was coming up with like my primary purposes. And one of them was, I only spend energy on things that are fun and interesting, or fun and or interesting, where it's basically, I kind of acknowledge about myself that I tend to grenade problems, or grenade objectives that get boring for me. And so I'm just leaning into that and being like, you know what? I'm only going to do the stuff I find fun and or interesting, and it's already paying off. Like this podcast, where I was just like, you know what? I really enjoy doing that. I don't have a format for it, but I know it's fun and I know it's interesting. So I'm just going to roll forward. And that's just my personal philosophy. It's not even my business philosophy, but it's already working out. So I love that you've just stated that, and it's all about growth for that
Right.
objective. That's hard.
And my track back Kevin version of that would be like, only obsess on things worth obsessing on, and be focused in what you're doing. And like what you're saying is that your mind, your body, you're basically disengaging from the things that you don't see as being an actual important lever pull.
Mhm.
I think it's important to listen to that.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's, well, because I could not listen to it and I could pretend like, oh no, like you, like I like being uncomfortable, or I only find growth in discomfort. And I'm like, well, that's part of the process, but that's interesting. So that actually rolls into my philosophy too, because it's an interesting thing to make yourself uncomfortable. And so it doesn't mean everything that I'm doing is going to be fun. I mean, ideally it is both, but as long as it's interesting, I'm making progress, because I can't stand staying still. I can't even stand looking at people that are staying still. And part of it could be jealousy on my side, because some people are content with what I would think is so little, so little achievement or so little growth or so little whatever. And they could just be completely content with that. Like, no, I enjoy every day, every minute of my life is pleasant. And I'm like, wow, it's good for you, I guess. But
So far in my life, at the end of the year and the start of the next year, I tend to come up with this opinion, which is last year, oh my gosh, I was an idiot.
nah.
So like I guess as long as I continue to come to that conclusion, I'm improving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, my biggest breakthrough actually came when I acknowledged that I was actually wrong, or I had misinterpreted the majority of the major events in my life, where I was like, oh my gosh, I totally read that wrong. And now I have a better understanding to acknowledge that I was wrong. And that's huge growth for me, because now it's like, oh yeah, that was terrible. Way to go. And now I
Right.
can move forward, or now I could actually learn the lesson I was supposed to learn back then with the new insights that I have now. And so, and again, that's fun and interesting to me, and it fits the objective. So I'm already succeeding at that point. So
100%. And the only way you could fail is if you decide that since it didn't happen on the timeline of your choosing, you're going to ignore the lesson.
no, this doesn't fit my
Uh,
plan.
no, like no, like there's definitely we're all gonna have some areas. I'm sure my team could count the list long, and if they can't, ask my spouse. But like there's gonna be the areas where we need to develop and improve. But yeah, I don't always hit that mark on the time frame that I wanted. But if I choose to let that go, just because I'm now 46 years old, oh, that's a horrible attitude. So. Uh,
No, and that's I think that's the circling back to the sea of uncertainty that we keep mentioning, is if you're willing to accept lessons as they come in whatever form they come, then you'll grow. And it doesn't matter your timetable. And actually, if you do have the timetable and you're so focused on growth in whatever areas you think you have to make, you're not open to like all these other areas that you didn't even know existed prior to starting the process. And now you just missed a bunch of lessons that will eventually circle back when you ruin a bunch of new crap. So
right.
if you just stay open to all of it, stay flexible, have your emergency plans and have your success plans, then I think you're set. So I think you just solved the problem. Way to go, Kevin.
I think that's the deal. I think we got to be willing to do hard things. There's a whole book on it, right? And we got to take on those things, recognizing that when, like I'm wearing this wristband and I've been wearing it since 2019
Wow.
with a commitment to suck at it until I'm good at it.
Love it.
And I'm just going to continue to work on it. And when I put that wristband on in 2019, Mark, I would not have told you that in 2024 I still have it on. But I'm continuing to suck at it until I'm good at it. And I actually had two. And I've
Uh,
been able to cut one of them off because I have
uh,
achieved that goal. And now I'm working on another one. And if you would have told me which one was the easier one at that time when I set those commitments to myself, it'd be the one that I'm still wearing. But I didn't even know what I didn't know
yeah.
at the time in order to understand just quite the mountain that I've committed myself to. But I think that that's that relentless pursuit of becoming someone that you're not, because you got to let go of that person in order to conceive of the new thing, believe you can do it, and then take all the action. There's going to be a period of time to where once I achieve this goal at my standard of a bar and cut that bracelet off, everyone else will be like, "Well, you're just good at it." I'm
Oh,
like, well,
yeah.
you just didn't see the last 5 years, you know?
That's a whole other can of worms that you just opened right there, which is like, because we all, and honestly, it's marketing's fault a lot of times, where we present this solution like it's something that we just thought of last night during a dream, instead of what it actually was, which was a list of failures and successes and setbacks and random advances and all the other crap that you went through to get there. And all they see is the results. And they're like, oh, well, I can't even listen to you because you're obviously talented and you're obviously blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, that's your limitation and you're projecting your insecurity on this situation and what I'm talking about. But great. Let me know how that works for you when you realize that everything you thought was easy because this guy did it is now more difficult. Or you'd even start because you said that this person's just talented or amazing and that's why they were able to do it and you can't do it. All of it's
Right.
limited.
100%. Most of the time, that person that's ahead of you has been doing hard things for longer than you, even if they're younger than you.
Yeah.
And inside of them, there's a lesson that you can take. And if you resent it, then that's more about you than them, you know. And maybe if they're achieving it younger than you, sometimes I can slide into a little bit of an ageist, if I must admit. And
Oh,
if someone is achieving a goal that I haven't achieved and they're 32, I'm like, whoa, what's happening here, but what's happening is I'm taking a long time wrestling with it and they're making decisions and implementing faster
yeah.
because I can be a little bit methodical and sit back and really dial in my scope before I fire a single bullet, and
Mhm.
they're just out there running and gunning.
Yep.
And before I even fire my single shot, they're through the course. So like then there's a lesson, and that's when I think it's okay to look at others to get a reflection of what they're doing that you're not, as long as you're not, you're going to judge yourself for it. So
Yeah. Oh man, that's an amazing sentiment right there. Because I mean, the what you have to have is humility to accept that, hey, I'm not good at everything. But then also awareness to accept that, like, hey, why did that make me upset? Like, why is this guy having success younger than me make me upset? And then you have
right.
to say, okay, well, because I didn't achieve that when I was that age, and I wish I could have, and I'm just being envious and jealous. And those are normal emotions, but now I can accept that and applaud that person. Like, man, way to go. I couldn't
Mhm.
do that at that age, but you did, and that's cool.
There's an interesting story. I'm going to keep names out of it, but there's somebody in the ecosystem that I'm in that just seems way ahead of me, and they're an honest 14, 15 years younger than me, and I just didn't understand how this is happening. So what did I do? I pulled up my credit card and I joined their highest program,
There you
and
go.
uh, and watching how that was implemented, and this is the part where I don't want to share any names, like it wasn't implemented at the bar at which I would have probably expected of myself. And what I realized is that we have complementing skills. They're just
Mm.
way better than me at a few things. And I might actually be better at them than a few things. And then I could see that they had done the work in this thing that I'm not good at for years. And I was like, the universe makes sense again. So I think sometimes it's just being willing to get close enough. And that actually drove a significant unleashing for me,
Mm.
of like, wait, I'm not actually missing any of the key ingredients. I just haven't put in the reps. And I started pushing in that, and we actually doubled the next year after that. And I think it's because I gave myself permission to just go off and do this thing. And and I think that that's how that goes sometimes. Now, it doesn't mean that I didn't make mistakes along the way, but that's what it is. It's,
That's
you
learning.
know, when I anybody who knows me, I don't have the most athletic build in the world, but I'm still going into the gym and I'm doing the reps probably 50% wrong. But if I want to get to them right, I still got to be in the gym.
So got to go.
So
Oh
yeah.
man, that's huge. Well, and because I could tell you what you could have done is you could have trolled the guy. You could have, and you see people do it sometimes online. And well, what's funny is my wife watches The Bachelor, and there's so much psychology watching these people, these poor individuals on this show. But a lot of the women in the current episode, like, and I've seen it in a bunch of episodes, but they'll start fighting with each other and they lose sight of what you're actually supposed to be doing, which is connecting with the bachelor, which I'm not going to get into how wrong that is. But it's always a mistake, and they always fail, and they always have to leave because that wasn't the point. And so what you did is, instead of becoming like, oh, I'm just going to battle this person to prove to everybody that I have the right system and his system's actually stupid, you just signed up for it, learned, integrated, and then did the thing. So I mean,
By
that's
getting closer,
impressive.
I got a new perspective, and I was like, huh, the universe generally rewards people for who they have become and the value they've offered to the world. Um, I haven't seen too many instances of that where if it did do it unjustly, the rubber band doesn't snap back.
Yes.
So
Oh, always
so
comes back.
normally if there is an unfair awarding, it comes back. It reels back in. So now we're just on a journey of not having to justify ourselves by putting down others, but just recognize that anyone who has a skill that we don't have, if we get close enough to them, we can start to understand it and adapt it faster. That's what growth is. And yeah, that's a little bit discomforting to recognize that this younger person spent some time in some areas that I have neglected, and now they have a result that I don't have. But now that I can see that, I knew exactly where I need to spend my time.
Oh yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because you do see that sometimes where you have somebody who's just like just started and they become a millionaire and blah blah blah. And even then, I don't, because I've never envied anybody, especially for wealth, because I'm like, wow, that's a different set of problems, and I know if I get there, I'll have a different set of problems too, and who knows whether that's good or not, but that's your journey and your experience, and good for you. However, uh that's not me, and who knows what's going to happen next, because I had a giant reset when I was like 27 and had thought had achieved some success, and then everything just imploded, and then I had to start over on every aspect of my life. And then at that point, I learned some things, but it still took another 12 years before I had like a really big another growth. And I had the potential for that same kind of failure at one point. So I'm thankful that I was able to be humble enough to grow and realize, like, okay, no, you don't have it all figured out. In a lot of ways, you don't have anything figured out. And
Right.
that was comforting to me.
I think it's Russell Brunson that said that he doesn't like to work with anyone who hasn't cycled before,
Mm,
which by cycling, meaning gone through this thing in order to basically feel like you've completely failed.
yep.
Because if you can't come at it from having had that experience, you really haven't tried anything yet, and you're probably not prepared for how difficult this thing you want to do really is, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, and if you did, well, because what you'll realize if you've hit the bottom is that you're still alive. And as long as you're still alive, you could still start the cycle over, right? Like that's literally the only thing that matters, is that you continue to move forward. And that actually wraps up the concept really well, because a lot of people say, like, why, because I'll get up on stage and talk about AI and be like, 500 million jobs or a billion jobs are going to be gone. And I'm not concerned, because I'm like, well, I've been at the bottom. So even if that happened to me again, I know that I'll still be alive. I'll still maintain, as long as I maintain my mentality, no matter what else happens, I'll be fine. And I hope everybody else is too. But if you haven't gone through that, then understand that it could happen. And, even if it does, you'll be okay. Just
Yeah,
deal.
and borrowing from Dharmesh Shah, co-founder of HubSpot, AI probably will take your job
Yeah.
and it's going to give you a better one.
Yeah.
Like it's going to take aspects of your job that probably it doesn't make sense for you to be doing in this modern landscape. And it's going to give you new things to do that are even more valuable. And if you can't approach it with that mindset,
You're gonna be stuck. Well,
you
you're
don't
gonna
have an
be
AI problem. You have a mindset problem.
Yep. And that's how it is. And even with that, I always tell people, I'm like, it's taking away all the stupid non-human aspects of your job, not anything important. Right now it's just spitting out the email that you would have spent 2 hours on in a minute. And
Mhm.
so is it bad? Is it good? It's like, no, it's taking stuff you shouldn't be doing in the first place. You should be doing human stuff, which is connecting with other humans and being creative. And that's pretty much it. And if that's all our jobs, then I think we solved all the problems.
Right. And with our new AI enabled selves, why don't we use the extra minutes we have to develop our mindset and our attitude for how we're going to approach this and others?
Love it.
um, and because like if you're getting any gains from AI, pour it back into that. And so that way we can double down on the right stuff.
Exactly. And yeah, no, this has been great, Kevin. I really appreciate your time. I think you're running an amazing organization. I think your mindset for growth and learning is spot on, and I'm sure it passes down to the people that work for you. Where can people learn more about that organization that you're growing?
Yeah, so my company's name is Lean Labs, but you can connect with me through thekevinbarber.com. That's my personal website. If you want to send me a note, connect with me on LinkedIn. I don't check email, so LinkedIn will be significantly better. And that's a great way to connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Really appreciate your time. I think you're doing amazing things. And yeah, you have the perfect mindset for, I always say this too, is that the big players, the next Apples and Metas and Teslas and all these companies are just developing right now. And we're going to find out who they are in the next few years. And honestly, it could be anybody. So, have that right mindset, steer the ship, keep it afloat, and you'll probably do awesome. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. And thank you so much for listening. This has been Podcast Mark, where we talk about personal development. What did I say? Personal development, business development. No, I screwed it up. I'm gonna have to cut this. But thank you so much for listening.